Good morning, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I received a majority, if not all, of the papers that were due for your first exam. And I have over 120 students, so it will take me a minute to grade, but my goal is to try to grade them within a week. That's my goal for myself, so please be patient with me. I will then load your grades on Blackboard so you know how you did on your first exam. So today we are going to cover Chapter 4, which I think is very appropriate since we have an election that's around a month away. We also have the first presidential debate that's coming up tomorrow. I hope you guys will look at it. Look, a lot at stake. Independents are going to determine who our next president is, just like they did in 2016. And you also have a lot of local races, a lot of city races, a lot of municipal races, a lot of races that are congressional. We have a congressional seat for those of you who lived in West U. So yeah, there's a lot at stake in the November 3rd. Early voting starts October 13th. Please, 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 no matter how you vote, register to vote and exercise your right. Okay, so let's get started with Chapter 4. We're going to talk about voter turnout. Even though prior to 2018, Texas was considered one of the lower states for voter turnout, that has changed with 2018, and I'll go into that. We're going to also talk about the types of Texas elections that we have. I think, again, very appropriate with a race coming up in November. With an election coming up in November. We're also going to identify the factors that give an advantage or certain candidates advantage over the others in races, and then apply all that we have learned in voting and elections. Okay, why do people vote and why don't they vote? Look. The most important demographic that we have seen so far as to why people vote are education, income, and age. The higher the age, the more likely you're going to vote. So that means people who are listening to this right now and reading the textbook and in my class, unfortunately, the demographics and social scientists and everything has shown that you guys, millennials, younger people, don't vote as much as your seniors. Political factors. If you have a strong identification with as a Democrat or a Republican, the stronger your identification, the more you're feeling compelled to go to the voting booth. So those are significant identity or characteristics that determine if you're going to vote or not. 2018, we saw a surge of voters in Texas. 18% increase, the sixth highest in the country. So we went to one of the lowest states as far as voter turnout to one of the highest in 2018. That's significant. And then we just saw some new stats showing that since 2018, we have registered over 1 million new voters. Some are saying that means that we're a purple state right now, so that means maybe possibly Texas will be turning blue. But we really won't know that until Election Day, right? I mean, those could be people who moved to the state because of free enterprise. They like our low taxes. They like our entrepreneurial spirit in Texas, and they're going to vote to keep the same leadership in place. We don't know what exactly that means until actual Election Day. But we do know we have over 1 million new voters, and that's significant, folks. So we will see if they actually go to the polls and what they do to our existing leadership. Okay, so in Texas, there's a voter ID law, and you must present one of the followings for voter ID. Either driver's license, Texas ID by DPS, which is a Texas election ID by DPS, concealed handgun license by DPS, U.S. military identification card, your passport, or your citizenship certificate. Those are one of the several IDs that you must you must show when you're going to vote. Voter turnout. How does the U.S. stack compare to the rest of the country? Well, you have a graph in your textbook, and it shows that we are most similar to Chile and Japan and Poland as far as voter turnout. Now, some of the reasons that we've seen in places where you're not going to have a strong turnout, some of the reasons could be their legal constraints, demographic factors. It may be difficult for some people to actually get to the polls. Party competition. For many, many years, and especially in Texas, Republicans have been the dominant party. Many Democrats had felt during those times, what's the point? Now, Democrats are in play, and you're seeing many people in the Democrat Party feeling energized because of that. Political participation. Historically, Texas has been among the most restrictive states as far as voting laws. But, and specifically, we talked about the history of Texas through poll taxes, the women's suffrage, when we only had white primaries. Those are examples where we have been very restrictive in our state in voting. All of these restrictions have changed, however, which makes it much more feasible for us to vote. We have very long ballots in Texas. So up until 2018, we were able to go in and just hit one button and vote for straight ticket voting, which meant if you hit that button, you can vote for all Democrats or all Republicans. A law was passed changing that. Recently, a federal judge overturned that law. So does that mean that straight ticket voting can be on the ballot in November? We're still in litigation, more than likely not. But up until 2018, we were allowed to do that in the state of Texas. Many have said the fact that we do have long ballots, which we do, they're very long, has been a detriment or a deterrent for people to come and vote. Which forms of participation do we encourage? Lately, we've been seeing a lot of protests. Unfortunately, in some cities like Portland and Seattle and New York, some of those protests have turned into riots and have turned violent. Very recently, Governor Abbott has passed an executive order saying that if for some reason protests have then turn into riots that are no longer peaceful, because of course no one's saying peaceful protests are not allowed, they are. But if for some reason the protest turns into riots and then incites violence, that there will be legal ramifications attached to that. Okay. So, different types of Texas elections. We have something called a direct primary. In Texas, those primaries are usually held in March. And it's a method in which each political party will select their nominations for certain races. For instance, Democrats will get together and they will determine who will be their nominee for governor or for attorney general and for various races up and down the ballot. That is called a direct primary in Texas, and it's held in March. Republicans will do the same thing. Republicans will go to the ballots and they will determine who is going to be their nominee for governor or lieutenant governor. So again, those are called direct primaries. Now, if you have more than two people who are running in a direct primary and not one of those candidates receives 50%, then you will have to have a runoff. Usually in Texas, if you have a runoff in a primary called a runoff primary, that is held in May. So in other words, the top two vote gatherers will have to come in May to run. So there are various fees. A lot of people don't realize this, that it costs to run in Texas. You have to pay a fee. In your table 4.3, it lists the various fees that are affiliated with each race. And a lot of people, for instance, in judicial races, you can sign a petition. If you get enough signatures, you can waive the fee. But many people aren't even aware. We have a lot of filing fees in Texas that a candidate has to pay if they want to run. So let's talk about different kind of primaries. So we talked about the direct primary, and that's what we have in Texas. We also have something called an open primary. And that's where voters can choose which primary they want to participate in. For instance, we will go to the ballot and say, whenever you go to vote, for instance, the election judge will say, which primary are you voting in, Republican or Democrat? It is an open primary when you have the opportunity to say which one on election day. A closed primary is where you've already specified which party you are going to vote in before that day. So it is called a closed primary. Okay, let me make sure excuse me for 1 second. Okay, now let's go to general elections. General elections is what we're seeing coming up in November 3rd. They are usually held on the first Tuesday after the first Monday of even-numbered years. Let me repeat that. This upcoming election that we are seeing is called a general election. And general elections are held on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November of even-numbered years. There is a figure in 4.3 in your textbook that really summarizes pretty well your primaries and your general election in Texas. It shows the various steps that each major party must take. In other words, every candidate in each major party, the steps that they have to take to win or become an elected official in Texas. Very important, figure 4.3. For instance, first you start with your March primary. Then if there are more than 2 people, you'll have your runoff. Then you'll have your November election. Okay. Elections are administered through our local government, right? And so you have ballot construction. You'll have a type of ballot. Let's start with the party column. In the party column, that's a type of ballot that's used in a general election. Again, general election is what we're seeing coming up in November, where all candidates from each party are listed. Split ticket voting. That means a voter, me or you, when we're going to vote, we are selecting candidates from one party for some offices and candidates from another party in another office. That's called split ticket voting. Again, that means you and I, when we go to an election in November, when we go to the voting booth in November, if we decide to do split ticket voting, that means a voter selects a candidates from one party for some offices and candidates from the other party for other offices. Straight ticket voting. That is when you're selecting all candidates of one particular party. So for instance, that would be me going in November and saying, I am a Republican. I am voting all Republican, no matter what. That is called straight ticket voting. And remember, up until 2018, we were allowed to just press a button if we wanted to participate in straight ticket voting. So again, straight ticket voting means that you're voting all candidates in one party. If I'm a Democrat, I'm going to go vote for every single Democrat. If I'm a Republican, I'm going to vote for every single Republican. That is called straight ticket voting. Political parties in Texas, they support the use of party column ballots. And the name has to be placed on the election, the general election ballot. And candidates must be a party nominee or independent. So in other words, it's going to be, for instance, governor, and then you'll have your Republican and Democrat and independent. That's what the construction of the ballot is, and that's what party column ballot represents. General election. Okay, so we're going towards the finish line. We're going to use the national election as this example. As you're going towards the last month, as we're seeing, we're heading to a couple of debates between the presidential candidates. You're going to see more negative campaigning. Do negative campaigns work? Some say yes, some say no. But for some reason, you see negative campaigns continue to be a very strong point of action in Texas campaigns. A couple of terms I want you to be familiar with before closing it out on this chapter. Political Action Committee. Those are organizations that raise and contribute money to political candidates. There are a whole host of laws and regulations that a political action committee has to abide by. But again, it is an organization that raises and then contributes money to political candidates. Another term that I want you to be very familiar with is soft money. That is money spent by political parties on behalf of political candidates, especially for the purpose of increasing voter registration and turnout. So that is chapter 4. It's all about politics at its best, voter turnout, elections, the types of elections we're having in Texas. And it's very crucial and pivotal as we're leading up to November, what we're going to see, the construction of the ballot, how the parties actually have a crucial role in all of that. Again, I am grading your papers. My goal is a week. And hopefully I will be able to post your grades on your papers that you turned in for exam 1 next week. As always, don't hesitate to email me any questions. Quite a few of you have been communicating with me that way. My cell number is 713-444-0657 if you don't want to email. And let's go ahead and I will also give you the study guides to chapter 4 very shortly. Thank you, guys.